I used to think the silence after a final interview was the worst part of looking for work, but I was wrong. The worst part was the polite, icy change in a recruiter's voice when they called to take an offer back. It happened 3 times in 6 months. I blamed the economy. Then I blamed myself, never suspecting that the people poisoning my name were the same ones inviting me over for Sunday dinner to comfort me. The rain in Harbor Glen always seemed to stick to the windows, a gray, oily film that refused to wash away. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the condensation, my phone resting on the formica surface like a loaded weapon. I was 33 years old. I had a degree in business administration, 5 years of impeccable experience in medical billing, and a credit score that was slowly bleeding out, point by agonizing point. I told myself that this time would be different. I repeated it like a mantra. Northbridge Logistics was perfect. It was a sprawling brick complex on the east side of the city, the kind of place that had a cafeteria with subsidized lunches and a retirement matching plan that kicked in after 90 days. The interview had lasted 2 hours. I had made the hiring manager, a stern woman named Mrs. Galloway, laugh 3 times by the time I left. Shaking her hand, she had practically mapped out my desk location. "I will send the offer letter by Friday," she had said. Her grip had been firm. Her eyes had been kind. It was Friday afternoon. The clock on the microwave read 2:17. I had spent the last 6 months in a freefall that I could not explain. My last 3 jobs had dissolved in my hands like wet paper. At Greystone Medical Billing, I was terminated after a routine audit. They said it was a policy review. At the temp agency, I was told my assignment ended early due to budget cuts. At the dental office before that, the office manager just stopped scheduling me, citing a restructuring. But Northbridge felt solid. It felt like the ground beneath my feet was finally hardening after months of mud. The phone buzzed. The vibration against the table sounded like a power drill in the quiet apartment. I snatched it up, my heart hammering against my ribs. The screen displayed the Northbridge area code. "This is it," I whispered. I swiped the screen and brought the phone to my ear, forcing a smile into my voice because I had read somewhere that people could hear a smile. "Hello, this is Camilla," I said. "Ms. Parker, this is Brenda from Human Resources at Northbridge," the voice said. It was not Mrs. Galloway. It was a flat, administrative voice, stripped of all the warmth I had experienced on Tuesday. "Hi, Brenda," I said. "I am so glad to hear from you." There was a pause on the line. It was a heavy, pregnant silence that made the hair on my arms stand up. "I am calling regarding the administrative lead position," Brenda said. "We have completed our final reference and background checks. Unfortunately, we will be rescinding the verbal offer at this time. We will not be moving forward with your employment." The world did not stop, but it tilted violently to the left. My stomach dropped as if I had missed a step on a long staircase. "I do not understand," I said, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to keep it steady. Mrs. Galloway said the feedback was excellent. She said I was the top candidate. "We have decided to move in a different direction," Brenda recited. It sounded like she was reading from a laminated card taped to her monitor. "But why?" I asked. I could hear the desperation leaking out, ugly and high-pitched. "Is there something missing from my file?" "I can provide more references. I can come in again. The decision is final." "Ms. Parker," she said, "best of luck in your search." The line went dead. I sat there for a long time. The silence of the apartment rushed back in, louder than before. I looked at the microwave clock. 2:20, 3 minutes. My entire future had been dismantled in 3 minutes. I stood up and walked to the sink. I felt nauseous. I splashed cold water on my face, watching the droplets run down my skin in the cracked mirror. "What is wrong with you?" I asked my reflection. The eyes staring back were dark and hollow. I looked tired. I looked guilty. That was the worst part. When you are fired enough times, when you are rejected enough times, you start to look like a criminal even when you have done nothing. You start to carry the scent of failure. I spent the weekend in a fugue state. I did not leave the apartment. I pulled the blinds down. I opened my laptop and went through my emails for the 1,000th time, scanning for a mistake I might have made. Did I use the wrong tone in my thank you note? Did I have a typo in my resume? I checked my credit report. It was clean. Aside from the mounting balances on my cards, no identity theft. No unexpected liens. I checked my social media. I had locked everything down years ago. There were no photos of me partying, no political rants, nothing that would scare off a corporate logistics firm. I was clean. I was qualified. I was desperate. By Monday morning, the confusion had hardened into a cold. Sharp need for answers. I could not accept the vague corporate language anymore. I needed to know what the variable was. I called the external recruiter who had set up the Northbridge interview. His name was Marcus. He had been aggressive and friendly last week, checking in on me every few hours. Now, he let my call go to voicemail. I called again an hour later. Voicemail. I called a third time just before lunch. He picked up on the second ring, sounding harried. Camilla. Look, I am swamped, Marcus said. Marcus, please. I said, I am not trying to be difficult. I just need to know what happened. Northbridge was a done deal. You said it was a done deal. Clients change their minds, he said, his voice tight. They did not just change their minds. I said, they rescinded the offer after the final check. What did they find? He sighed, a long, irritated exhalation. I heard the clicking of a keyboard in the background. I really cannot go into specifics. Camilla, he said, it opens us up to liability. I am not going to sue anyone. I said, I am trying to pay my rent. If there is an error on my background check, I need to fix it. Please, just tell me what they said. There was a long silence. I waited. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. There were concerns, Marcus said, lowering his voice. Concerns about what? I asked. Concerns about your tenure at Greystone, he said. I frowned. Greystone? I worked there for 2 years. I had perfect performance reviews until the layoff. The feedback we got was specific. Marcus said it was regarding cash handling protocols and missing items, inventory discrepancies. I froze. The room seemed to lose its air. Cash handling? I repeated. Marcus, I was a medical billing specialist. I worked in a cubicle. I typed codes into a computer. I never handled cash. I never even saw a cash register. We did not accept payments on site. That is just what I heard, Marcus said, sounding eager to get off the phone. Look, in this market, any red flag is a deal breaker. I have to go. Camilla, good luck. He hung up. I stared at the phone. Cash handling. Theft. The accusation was so absurd, it felt physical, like a slap. I had never stolen a paperclip, let alone money. But someone had told Northbridge that I had. I immediately dialed the main line for Greystone Medical Billing. My hands were shaking. I navigated the automated menu until I reached Human Resources. Greystone HR. This is Sarah. Hi, Sarah, I said. My name is Camilla Parker. I am a former employee. I need to speak to someone about the reference information you are providing to prospective employers. One moment, Sarah said. Music played. It was a generic, tinny jazz tune. I paced the length of my small kitchen. 4 steps, turn, 4 steps, turn. Sarah came back on the line. Ms. Parker, I have your file here. Our policy for references is strict. We only confirm dates of employment and job title. That is it. Are you sure? I asked, because I just lost a job offer because someone told them I was fired for theft, specifically involving cash handling. Sarah sounded genuinely confused. I am looking at your file right now. Ms. Parker, you were part of the reduction in force last October. You are eligible for rehire. There is nothing here about theft, and we do not give out qualitative data anyway. We use an automated verification service for dates. Then who are they talking to? I asked. I do not know, Sarah said, but it is not coming from this office. I thanked her and hung up. My head was spinning. If Greystone HR was not saying it, who was? I sat down at my laptop and opened a new spreadsheet. I needed to see it. I needed to visualize the disaster. I started typing. Column A. Company applied to. Column B. Date of interview. Column C. Date of rejection. Column D. Reason given. I filled in Northbridge, then the temp agency, then the dental office, then two others I had forgotten about. Smaller rejections that had stung less, but now looked suspicious. I looked at the dates. Every single rejection happened within 48 hours of the final reference request. I picked up my phone again. I scrolled through my contacts until I found a number I had not used in 6 months. Jen. She had sat in the cubicle next to mine at Greystone. We used to share lunch breaks and complain about the air conditioning. I texted her. Hey Jen, long time. Do you have 5 minutes to talk? It is important. 3 minutes later, my phone rang. Cammy? Jen's voice was hushed. I could hear typing in the background. She was still at work. Hey, Jen, I said, I am sorry to bother you. You are not bothering me. She said, but I can't talk long. The new manager is a hawk. Jen, I need to ask you something crazy. I said, has anyone called the office asking about me? The typing stopped. Why are you asking? She whispered. Because I cannot get a job. I said, someone is telling people I stole from the company. Jen let out a breath. It sounded like a hiss. I knew it. She said, you knew what? I asked. My heart skipped a beat. About 2 weeks ago. Jen said, the main line rang. I picked it up because the receptionist was in the bathroom. It was a guy calling from some logistics company. He asked for a supervisor to verify a reference for Camilla Parker. And? I pressed. I put him on hold to find the manager. Jen said, but before I could, the line blinked. Someone else picked it up from another extension. Who? I asked. I do not know, she said. But later, I heard talk in the break room. Someone said a supervisor had to take a call because you were in legal trouble. They said you were let go for taking petty cash. Jen, I never touched petty cash. I said, I know that. Cammy, she said, we all know that. But the rumor is going around, and the weird thing is, no supervisor here admits to taking that call. It was like someone intercepted it, or someone pretended to be us. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. Who would do that? I asked. I do not know, Jen said. But you need to be careful. It sounded bad. Look, I have to go. My boss is coming. She hung up. I sat in the silence of my apartment, the rain still drumming against the glass. Someone had impersonated a supervisor. Someone had intercepted a call. This was not bad luck. This was hunting. I looked at my spreadsheet. I added a new column. Reference contact provided. For every single job, I had provided the standard HR number for Greystone, but I had also provided 2 personal references, as requested. One was a former professor, the other was my mother, Diane Parker. I had listed her as a character reference for a volunteer project I did years ago. It was a stretch, but some applications demanded a non-professional contact. My stomach churned. It was impossible. It was a thought so ugly I wanted to vomit it up immediately. I dialed my parents' landline. They still had a landline. They lived in a beautiful colonial house 3 towns over, a place with manicured hedges and a driveway that was always swept clean. My mother answered on the second ring. Parker Residence, she said. Her voice was light, airy. It was the voice of a woman who baked scones and volunteered at the library. Hi, Mom? I said. Camila, she cried. Robert, pick up the extension. It is Camila. I heard a click, and then my father's breathing. It was heavy, rhythmic. Hi, sweetheart, my father said. Hi, Dad, I said. How are you doing? My mother asked. Did you hear back from that logistics place? The one with the nice benefits? I closed my eyes. I did. I said, I didn't get it. Oh, no, my mother said. Her voice dropped an octave, dripping with sympathy. Oh, Cammy, that is terrible. Did they say why? They said I failed the background check. I said, I was watching the rain again. Someone told them I was a thief. A thief, my father said. His voice was calm, Deep. That is ridiculous. Who would say that? I do not know. I said, but it keeps happening. Every time I get close to a job, someone sabotages it. Well, you know how these corporate places are, my mother said soothingly. They are so picky, and maybe it is a sign. Honey, a sign of what? I asked. That you are pushing too hard. She said, you sound exhausted. I can hear it in your voice. You sound frantic. I am frantic. Mom, I said, I have $700 in my bank account. Rent is due in 10 days. We told you, my father said. You do not have to live like this. You are struggling. Cammy, we can see it. I am struggling because I cannot get hired. I said, you are struggling because you are trying to do everything alone. My mother said, we have the room above the garage. It is all ready. You could just come home for a while, just until you get your head straight. I gripped the phone. My head is straight. I said, I just need a job. Maybe you are not ready for a job, my father said. Not a high-pressure one. Remember what happened at Greystone? You were so stressed. Maybe you made mistakes you do not even remember. I did not make mistakes. I said, and I certainly did not steal. Of course not. Not on purpose, my mother added quickly. But stress does funny things to the memory. Sweetheart, we just want you safe. We want you where we can look after you. The trap was so subtle I almost missed it. They were not angry. They were not cruel. They were wrapping me in cotton wool, suffocating me with concern. They were rewriting my reality in real time. Maybe you made mistakes you do not remember. I felt a sudden, intense desire to get off the phone. I have to go. I said, I have to figure out what to sell to pay the electric bill. Don't be dramatic. My father said, just come home. We will send a truck for your things. I hung up. I stared at the phone. My heart was pounding. They did not sound surprised that I was accused of theft. They sounded prepared. I spent the next 3 days dismantling my life. I sold my espresso machine on an online marketplace for $40. It was worth $200, but I needed cash for groceries. I sold my winter coat. I sold the nice lamp from the living room. My apartment began to look like a skeleton. The empty spaces where things used to be felt like accusations. I stopped answering the phone. Every time it rang, I flinched. I was terrified it was another recruiter calling to tell me what a terrible person I was, or my parents calling to tell me how unstable I sounded. I started sleeping with the lights on. I woke up at 3 a.m, convinced someone was standing in the hallway. The isolation was physical. It felt like the walls were moving closer by an inch every day. I began to doubt my own mind. Had I taken money? Had I blacked out and stuffed cash into my purse at a job that didn't even have cash? My father's voice echoed in my head. Stress does funny things to the memory. Maybe I was crazy. Maybe I belonged in the room above the garage, safe and monitored. On Thursday, the mail arrived. I heard the carrier drop the bundle through the slot in the door. I waited 10 minutes before I picked it up. As if the envelopes might bite me. Bills, a flyer for a pizza place, a final notice from a credit card company, and a plain white envelope. It looked old. The paper was slightly yellowed at the edges. It had been forwarded. I could see the yellow sticker from the post office over the original address. It had been sent to my college apartment, a place I hadn't lived in for 12 years, then forwarded to my first apartment in Harbor Glen. Then here, it had been chasing me. There was no return address, just my name, written in a spidery, elegant cursive that made my breath catch in my throat. I knew that handwriting. I sat down on the floor, ignoring the cold linoleum. I stared at the letters, the way the C in Camilla curled at the top. Eloise. My grandmother Eloise had died 4 years ago. She was my father's mother, a woman made of steel wire and impeccable manners. We had been close, in a quiet way, until the end when dementia had supposedly taken her. My parents had kept me away then, saying she was too far gone, that she wouldn't recognize me. I tore the envelope open. Inside was a single sheet of lined notebook paper and a small, heavy brass key taped to the bottom. The note was short. The ink was blue ballpoint, pressed hard into the paper. Camilla, if you are reading this, they have started. I hoped I was wrong. I hoped they would let you be. But if this letter found you, it means you are in trouble, and they are the cause. If they ever try to make you unemployable, do not argue. Do not try to reason with them. They will gaslight you until you think the sky is green. Follow the list. I already did the arguing. Go to the Harbor Glen Community Credit Union, Box 412. I paid the fees for 20 years. I love you. Do not let them win. Grandma Eloise. I read the note 3 times. I already did the arguing. I touched the brass key. It was cold and real. My grandmother had been dead for 4 years. But she had seen this coming. She had seen them coming. I looked around my empty apartment. The rain was still falling outside, but for the first time in weeks, the gray film on the window didn't look like a prison. It looked like a screen. And I was finally seeing what was behind it. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't incompetent. I was a target. And my grandmother had left me a weapon. I stood up. I put the key in my pocket. I looked at the phone on the table. It buzzed again. Probably my mother. I didn't answer it. I went to the bedroom and put on my shoes. I had a safety deposit box to open. The despair that had been drowning me for months began to recede, replaced by something colder, sharper, and infinitely more useful. Curiosity. I grabbed my raincoat and walked out the door. The lock clicked shut behind me. A sound of finality. Part 1 of my life, the part where I was a victim, was over. Part 2 was about to begin. The address for Wexler and Sato Legal Services was written in the same steady blue ink as the rest of the note. It was a small office on the edge of the downtown district, tucked between a dry cleaner and a bakery that always smelled of burnt sugar. I sat in my car, the engine idling, staring at the piece of paper in my hand. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained a bruised purple, heavy with unfallen water. I ran my thumb over the brass key. It was heavy, old-fashioned, the kind of key that felt like it opened something permanent. I had not spoken to my grandmother Eloise in the 6 months before she died. The guilt of that fact had been a dull, constant ache in my chest for 4 years. It was not because we had fought. It was because life had become a suffocating blanket of obligations. I was working double shifts at the time, trying to save for a deposit on an apartment that I never got. I kept telling myself I would go see her next weekend, then the weekend after that. I remembered the last time I saw her. She was sitting in her sunroom, a blanket over her knees, looking out at her overgrown garden. She had looked at me with a sharpness that belied her frailty and said, "Be careful, Camila. They do not like it when the bird grows feathers." I had laughed then. I thought she was talking about her finches. Now, sitting in my car with her handwriting staring back at me, I realized she had been talking about me. She had been talking about the cage. The realization made me feel a surge of warmth, followed immediately by a chill. She had known. She had predicted this moment, this exact sequence of desperation. 4 years before it happened, it meant she had watched me with a clarity I did not possess. It also meant she had died knowing I was walking into a trap, and she had spent her final days building an exit door instead of saying goodbye. I put the car in gear and drove toward the Harbor Glen Community Credit Union. The bank was a quiet, carpeted sanctuary that smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. I signed in at the front desk, my hand shaking slightly as I wrote my name. The teller, a woman with kind eyes and a name tag that read, Beatrice, led me back to the vault. "It takes 2 keys, she said softly, sliding her master key into the lock of box 412. I inserted the brass key. It turned with a satisfying, heavy click. Beatrice pulled the long metal drawer out and carried it to a small private room. "I will leave you to it," she said, closing the door behind her. I sat at the wooden table. The box was cold metal. I lifted the lid. There was no money inside, no jewelry, just a thick, expandable file folder, a black USB drive, and a small, spiral-bound notebook with a red cover. The folder was labeled in Eloise's handwriting, "Employment Interference, for Camila only." I stared at the words. Employment interference. It was a legal term. It was specific. It was not the ramblings of a paranoid old woman. It was a categorization. I reached for the red notebook first. It was cheap, the kind you buy at a drugstore for $1. I opened it to the first page. The entry was dated 5 years ago, October 14th, 2:30 in the afternoon. Robert called. He was angry that Camila got the promotion at the clinic. He said, "She is going to think she does not need us anymore," Diane said. "We need to slow her down. We need to remind her where her help comes from." I stopped breathing. The handwriting was rushed, as if Eloise had been writing while listening to something. I turned the page. November 2nd, 6:15 in the evening, dinner at the house. Diane asked Camila about her new boss, asked for the name. Camila gave it. Diane wrote it down on a napkin. Later, I heard Robert on the phone in the study. He was not using his normal voice. He was using a deeper voice. He asked to speak to the clinic administrator. He hung up when I walked in. I flipped through the pages. There were dozens of entries, years of them. January 12th. Camila is looking at apartments in the city. Robert says, "That is too far. We cannot keep an eye on her if she is in the city. We need to make sure the application falls through." March 4th. The loan officer called the house looking for Camila. Diane took the message. She never gave it to Camila. She told the officer Camila had changed her mind. I felt sick. A physical wave of nausea rolled through me. I had lost that apartment. I had cried for days. I thought I had just missed the call. I thought I was irresponsible. My parents had intercepted the message. I looked at the dates. They matched every failure, every stumble, every sudden roadblock in my adult life. When I tried to go back to school, my financial aid paperwork went missing. When I tried to move to Chicago, my car broke down 3 times in 1 month. A car my father insisted on taking to his mechanic. The notebook was not a diary. It was a surveillance log. One entry near the end stood out. August 20th. I am dying. I know it. And I know what they will do when I'm gone. They will wait until she is strong, and then they will break her legs so they can be the ones to carry her. I have to prepare the proof. They think I am senile. They talk in front of me now. They talk about the money. They talk about keeping Camila from getting ahead until she learns gratitude. Gratitude. The word burned on the page. They wanted me grateful. They wanted me broken so they could be the heroes who fixed me. It was a sickness, a Munchausen syndrome by proxy. But instead of making me physically ill, they were making my life ill. I closed the notebook. My hands were trembling so hard I had to clasp them together on the table. I opened the folder. Inside were typed transcripts, copies of emails I had never seen, and a business card for Mara Wexler, attorney at law. I put everything back in the box except the folder, the notebook, and the USB drive. I shoved them into my bag. I felt like I was carrying a bomb. I drove straight to the law office. I did not call for an appointment. I did not care. The office of Wexler and Sato was cluttered with boxes and smelled of old paper. A receptionist with bright pink hair looked up as I burst in, breathless and pale. "I need to see Mara Wexler." I said, "My name is Camila Parker. Eloise Parker sent me." The receptionist did not ask if I had an appointment. She looked at my face, then at the red notebook clutching in my hand, and pressed a button on her phone. "She is here," the receptionist said. A moment later, a door opened. A woman in her 50s stepped out. She was wearing a gray cardigan and reading glasses on a chain. She looked nothing like the sharks on television. She looked like a librarian who specialized in banned books. "Camila," she said. Her voice was dry and calm. "I have been wondering when you would come." We sat in her office. It was small, lined with bookshelves that overflowed with binders. I put the notebook and the folder on her desk. They ruined everything. I said, my voice sounded hollow, like it was coming from someone else. "I lost 3 jobs. I'm about to lose my apartment." They did it. My parents did it. Mara Wexler nodded. She did not look shocked. She did not look pitying. She looked clinical. "I know." She said, "Eloise told me they would." She opened the folder on her desk. She had her own copy. "This is a classic case of tortious interference with business relations, coupled with defamation. Mara said, in layman terms, they are sabotaging your livelihood. The problem with these cases is that they are usually impossible to prove. It is usually just whispers, bad vibes, lost paperwork. It is smoke. She tapped the red notebook, but Eloise did not leave us smoke. She left us bricks. Mara opened a file on her computer. Your grandmother came to me 5 years ago. Mara said. She was concerned about the level of control your parents were exerting. She hired me to help her set up a trap. A trap? I asked. Mara nodded. Eloise was convinced that your parents were impersonating people, calling your employers, pretending to be you, pretending to be references. So, she created a honeypot. I stared at her. What is a honeypot? Do you remember applying for a job at a company called Ridley & Sons about 4 years ago? Mara asked. I frowned. Vaguely. I did not get it. You did not get it because it did not exist. Mara said. Eloise set up a shell listing. She had you apply. She helped you with the resume, didn't she? Yes, I whispered. She proofread it, and she told you to put a specific phone number down for your previous supervisor. Mara said. She said she knew the supervisor had moved, and she had the new direct line. I remembered. I had been so grateful for the help. That number did not go to a supervisor. Mara said, it went to a private server Eloise paid for. It was a voicemail box disguised as a professional line, and it recorded every incoming call. Mara clicked a file on her computer. Listen. The sound of a phone ringing filled the small office. Then, a voice. Hi. This is Robert Parker calling regarding Camilla Parker. I am a former manager of hers. I just wanted to reach out privately. My father's voice. It was smooth, confident. It was the voice he used when he was closing a deal or talking to a neighbor. I know she has a strong resume. The recording continued. But I feel a moral obligation to mention some instability. We had issues with theft. Small things at first, but then petty cash. We handled it internally because we didn't want to ruin a young woman's future, but I would not recommend placing her in a position of trust. The recording ended. I sat frozen in the chair. That was 4 years ago. Mara said, he thought he was talking to a hiring manager at Ridley & Sons. He was talking to a tape recorder. There were 3 more recordings. Mara said, 2 from your father, 1 from your mother. Your mother was more subtle. She called pretending to be a concerned previous employer, asking if you had disclosed your medical history. She implied you had a breakdown. My mother, the woman who brought me soup when I was sick, the woman who texted me heart emojis, she implied I was crazy. I said, Mara nodded, to keep you from getting the job, to keep you dependent. Why? I asked. The word cracked in the middle. Why would they do this? I am their daughter. Control, Mara said simply, and perhaps something else. Eloise suspected there was a financial motive. She thought they were hiding something, and they needed you close and discredited so you would never find it, if you are the family failure. No one listens to you if you start asking questions about money. I looked at the red notebook again. Keep Camilla from getting ahead until she learns gratitude. So what do we do? I asked. Mara clasped her hands. We have enough for a lawsuit, she said. Defamation, interference, intentional infliction of emotional distress. We can file tomorrow, but you need to understand what that means. It means war. It means public records. It means they will fight back. And they will likely try to paint you as mentally unstable to discredit the evidence. She paused. Or, we can do what Eloise suggested. We can use the evidence to insulate you first. We can stop the bleeding. I looked at the wall. I thought about the Northbridge job. I thought about the way the recruiter's voice had changed. I thought about the shame I had felt, the way I had sold my coffee machine, the way I had questioned my own sanity. I had spent my entire adult life apologizing. I apologized for being late when I wasn't. I apologized for missing family dinners I wasn't invited to. I apologized for existing in a way that seemed to inconvenience them. I felt a shifting inside me. It was like a heavy stone rolling over in my chest. The weeping, frightened part of me, the part that just wanted her parents to love her, went quiet. In its place, something cold and sharp opened its eyes. I do not want to just stop the bleeding. I said. My voice was steady now. I want to understand the wound. Mara smiled. It was a small, tight smile. Good, she said. Because Eloise left one more thing, but it is not here. Where is it? It is at her house, Mara said. The rental on Maple Street. I stood up. I felt lighter, but also heavier. I felt like a weapon that had finally been loaded. I will go there now, I said. The drive to Eloise's house was a journey through a ghost story. The rental was a small, bungalow-style house on the north side of town. It was modest, with peeling white paint and a porch that sagged slightly on the left. Eloise had lived there for 10 years. My parents hated it. They called it a shack. They offered to move her into a facility, into their guest house, anywhere else. She had refused. She said she liked the quiet. Now I knew why. She needed a place where they could not hear her on the phone. A car was parked in the driveway, a silver sedan. The trunk was open, and a man was lifting a box of books out. He looked up as I pulled in. He was tall, thin, with graying hair and a face that looked like it had been carved out of driftwood. You must be Camila, he said. He did not smile, but he did not look unkind. I said, who are you? I am Arthur, he said. I am the executor of the estate, and the caretaker. I have been keeping the lights on. He wiped his hands on a rag. She told me you would come eventually, he said. She said it might take a few years. She said you had to get angry enough first. I am angry enough, I said. Arthur nodded. Come inside. The house smelled exactly as I remembered it. Lavender, old paper, and dust. The furniture was covered in white sheets, looking like lumpy ghosts in the dim light. Arthur led me to the kitchen. There was a single envelope sitting on the counter. It was thick, sealed with wax. She left this for you, Arthur said. She gave me very specific instructions. She said, give this to Camila on the day she stops apologizing for existing. He looked at me. Did you stop? He asked. I thought about my father's voice on the recording. I feel a moral obligation to mention some instability. I thought about my mother's rehearsed sympathy. Come home, Cammy. We can look after you. Yes, I said. I stopped. Arthur handed me the envelope. Then it is yours. I took it. It felt heavy. I stood in the center of the kitchen, the silence of the house pressing in on me. I was not alone. Eloise was here, in the dust, in the plan, in the anger. She had spent her final years playing a game of chess against her own son and daughter-in-law, moving pieces she knew she would never see land, all to protect me. I felt a sudden, crushing wave of grief. It was not the soft, hazy grief of the funeral. It was a sharp, agonizing pain. She had been alone in this war. She had fought for me while I was busy trying to please the people attacking us. I pressed the envelope to my chest. Thank you, Grandma, I whispered into the empty room. I walked out to the porch. The rain had started again, a slow, steady drizzle. I sat on the swing, the chains creaking under my weight. I slid my finger under the flap of the envelope and tore it open. This was part 2. The discovery. The arming. I pulled out the papers inside. It was not just a letter, it was a map. And at the top of the first page, in Eloise's clear, unshakable hand, was a title, The Truth About the Money. I took a deep breath of the wet air. I was not Camila the victim anymore. I was Camila the witness. And I was about to see exactly what my parents were so afraid of. The rain on Eloise's porch had turned into a steady, rhythmic drumming that seemed to isolate the house from the rest of the world. I sat on the swing. My damp coat gathered around me, and read the letter that would dismantle the last 33 years of my life. Eloise's handwriting was firm, lacking the tremor that had plagued her in the final months. This was written before the end. It was written with clarity. My dearest Camila, you have spent your life wondering why you are the problem. You have asked yourself why you cannot hold on to things, why you are always the one who stumbles. Why your parents treat you like a bomb that is always 5 seconds away from exploding. I need you to understand something that took me too long to see. They are not afraid for you. They are afraid of you. You were always sharp. Camila, even as a child, you noticed when the numbers didn't add up. You asked why we had a new car when Robert said business was bad. You asked why the charity dinners cost more than the donations they brought in. You have a mind for accounting, just like me. That terrified them. Diane and Robert are not merely strict, they are hiding something. I believe they have been moving money for years. I have seen ledgers that do not make sense. I have seen accounts that appear and vanish. And I believe they decided long ago that the best way to keep you from looking at their house was to make sure you were too busy burning down your own. If you are a failure, you have no credibility. If you are unstable, no one listens when you point out a discrepancy. If you are a thief, then any missing money can be blamed on you. They are not protecting you from the world. They are building a narrative to protect themselves from you. I lowered the paper. The air in my lungs felt cold and thin. I looked out at the wet lawn. A narrative. It made a sickening kind of sense. Every time I had started to succeed, when I got the job at the clinic, when I saved enough for the apartment, the sabotage began. It wasn't just cruelty, it was strategy. If I was independent, I was dangerous. If I was dependent, I was contained. I stood up, folding the letter carefully and placing it in my inside pocket next to the USB drive. My hands were not shaking anymore. A strange, icy calm had settled over me. It was the calm of a mathematician who finally sees the equation resolve. I drove back to the city, the windshield wipers slicing back and forth like a metronome. I went straight to Mara Wexler's office. Mara was waiting for me. She had a stack of papers on her desk, formal responses to the subpoenas she had rushed out regarding my employment records. "You look different," Mara said, watching me as I sat down. "I know why they are doing it." I said, "It is not just control, it is cover." I told her about the letter. Mara listened, her eyes narrowing behind her glasses. She did not dismiss it. She was a lawyer. She understood that people did terrible things for money every day. "If that is true," she said, "then we are not just dealing with toxic parenting, we are dealing with potential fraud, and they are using your reputation as a shield." She pushed the stack of papers toward me. "We got the internal HR files from Greystone and the temp agency," she said. It was a fight. "But since you are the subject, we have a right to view the data. Look at this." I pulled the file closer. It was a printout of the internal notes from Greystone's HR system. There, in the exit interview section, an interview I never had, was a note entered by the HR director. Termination due to restructuring. Note: Senior management advised of pattern of dishonesty regarding inventory, marked ineligible for rehire. I stared at the words, pattern of dishonesty. "Now look at the temp agency file," Mara said. I opened the second folder. It was a log of the reason for ending my assignment. Assignment ended. Client requested removal. Cited personality conflict and pattern of dishonesty regarding timekeeping. I looked up at Mara. "It is the same phrase." I said, "Identical." Mara said, "Pattern of dishonesty. That is not standard corporate speak. That is a script. 2 different companies. 2 different managers. But the exact same phrasing entered into your permanent record. That implies the input came from the same source." "My parents," I said. "They are planting the phrase." Mara said, "They use it when they call. They make sure it gets written down. It is branding." I felt a flash of heat, a sudden urge to scream, but I pushed it down into the cold place in my chest. Screaming would not help. Screaming was what the unstable Camilla would do. "We need to catch them in the act," I said. "We need to know for sure that it is happening now. Today." Mara nodded. She opened her laptop. "We are going to run a controlled test," she said. "We chose a small local company called Juniper and Ash Interiors. They were hiring for an administrative assistant. It was a real job. But we knew the hiring manager was away for the week, so the phones were being manned by an assistant. Mara helped me draft a resume. It was my real resume. but with one crucial change: the phone number for my previous supervisor was not a real person. It was a new line Eloise had set up, now routed directly to a recorder on Mara's desk. I submitted the application online at 2 o'clock on Tuesday. Then, we waited. The waiting was a physical agony. I sat in my apartment, staring at the wall, unable to eat. I kept checking my phone, even though I knew the call would go to Mara. 24 hours passed. Nothing. 48 hours. I was beginning to lose hope. Maybe they had stopped. Maybe they sensed that I was on to them. Then, on Thursday afternoon, Mara called me. "Come to the office," she said. Her voice was flat. We got one. I drove to the office in a daze. When I walked in, Mara did not say hello. She simply pointed to the computer speakers. "It came in 20 minutes ago," she said. The person calling identified himself as Robert Parker. She pressed play. "Hello, this is Robert Parker. I am calling regarding an application you may have received from a Camila Parker." I closed my eyes. It was him. It was my father. But his voice. It wasn't the angry voice he used when I was late for dinner. It wasn't the dismissive voice he used when I talked about my career. It was warm. It was heavy with concern. It was the voice of a good man carrying a terrible burden. "I am her father," the voice continued. "I know this is unorthodox, calling like this, but we are very worried about Camila. She has been struggling lately. There have been incidents." There was a pause on the recording. I could hear the young woman on the other end, the assistant at Juniper and Ash, sounding confused. "Incidents?" the assistant asked. "Yes." My father said, "She has a history of taking what isn't hers. Small things. Money. It is a compulsion. We are getting her help, but I felt I had to reach out. I would hate for a small business to suffer because of our family's struggle. I am just trying to protect people." The recording ended. I sat in the silence, the sound of his voice echoing in my ears. Just trying to protect people. He sounded so reasonable, so kind. If I were a stranger, I would have believed him. I would have thanked him for the warning. I would have shredded the application and thought, bullet dodged. He wasn't just destroying my career. He was assassinating my character with a smile. "Turn it off," I whispered. Mara stopped the playback. "That is actionable," she said. "That is defamation per se. He explicitly accused you of a crime to a third party. We can nail him." "No," I said. I stood up. "Not yet." "Where are you going?" Mara asked. "I'm going to ask him why." I said, "Camila." "Wait," Mara said, standing up. "Do not lose your temper. If you blow up at them, they will use it. They will say, 'See, she is unstable.'" I turned to her. My face felt like it was carved from stone. "I am not going to blow up." I said, "I am just going to visit my parents." I drove to the house in the suburbs. It was a beautiful house. The lawn was manicured to within an inch of its life. The windows sparkled. It looked like the home of a perfect American family. My key still worked. I unlocked the front door and walked in. Diane was in the living room, arranging flowers in a crystal vase. She looked up, startled. As I entered, "Camila?" she said. "We were not expecting you. Is everything all right?" She looked at my face and paused. She put the flowers down. "Robert!" she called out. "Robert! Camila is here!" My father emerged from his study. He was wearing a cashmere sweater. He looked distinguished. He looked like the man on the recording. "Hi. Honey," he said. "To what do we owe the pleasure?" I stood in the center of the Persian rug. I did not take off my coat. "I know," I said. They exchanged a glance. It was a micro-expression. A flicker of communication so fast you would miss it if you weren't looking for it. "Know what, sweetheart?" Diane asked, stepping closer. "You look pale. Are you eating?" "I know you called Juniper and Ash Interiors," I said. "I know you called Northbridge. I know you have been calling every employer I have applied to for the last 5 years and telling them I am a thief." The silence that followed was absolute. Then, Diane sighed. It was a long, tragic sound. She looked at Robert, then back at me, her eyes filling with tears. "Oh, Camila," she said. She did not scream. She did not deny it angrily. She looked wounded. She looked like I had just slapped her. "You are misremembering things again," she said softly. "I am not misremembering." I said, "I heard the recording. I have the logs. Camila, please," my father said. He walked over and put a hand on my shoulder. His grip was firm, possessive. "Stop this. You are upset. You are turning this into something ugly." "I am turning it into something ugly?" I asked. "You told a stranger I was a thief. You said I had a compulsion." "We are just trying to help you," Diane cried out. She pressed a hand to her chest. "You are not well. Camila, you haven't been well for a long time. We clean up your messes. We try to keep you from getting into situations you can't handle." She was so convincing. For a second, just a split second, I felt the old doubt creep in. Maybe I am sick. Maybe I did something I don't remember. But then I felt the weight of the USB drive in my pocket. I remembered Eloise's letter. "They will gaslight you until you think the sky is green." I stepped back, shaking off my father's hand. "I am not sick," I said, "and I am not a thief, but you are liars." Robert's face hardened. The concern vanished, replaced by a cold, business-like calculation. He walked to the sideboard and poured himself a drink. He did not offer me one. "Okay," he said. "Let's say we did make a few calls. Let's say we were overprotective. What are you going to do about it? Sue us? You have no money. Camila, you have no job. I have a lawyer." I said, "Mara Wexler." Robert laughed. It was a dry, dismissive sound. "Wexler? She's a bottom feeder. Listen to me. Camila, you are walking on a razor's edge. If you try to fight us, we will have to tell the truth, the real truth. About your mental state, about the money you have borrowed over the years." He opened a drawer in the sideboard and pulled out a document. It was a single page, typed on thick paper. He held it out to me. "We can fix everything," he said. "I can make the bad references stop. I can even help you with rent. I can get you a job with a friend of mine, somewhere low stress." I looked at the paper. It was an acknowledgement of debt. It stated that I, Camila Parker, had received family support funds totaling $50,000 over the last decade, and that I agreed to a repayment plan. It was a lie. I had never borrowed $50,000. They had given me birthday checks, Christmas gifts, maybe $1,000 here and there for car repairs. But $50,000? If I signed this, I was admitting to being financially reckless. I was creating a paper trail that proved I was bad with money. "Sign this," Robert said softly, "acknowledging the support we have given you. It is just for our records, to keep things clean. You sign this, and we will stop the calls. We will take care of you." It was a bribe and a trap. If I signed it, they could show it to anyone. "See? She admits she owes us a fortune. She is in debt. She is desperate. It would validate every lie they had told about me stealing." I looked at Diane. She was watching me with wet, pleading eyes. "Just sign it. Cammy," she whispered, "let us help you. Come home." I looked at the document. I looked at my father's expensive sweater. I looked at the crystal vase. I realized then that they were terrified. They were not acting like parents dealing with a rebellious child. They were acting like criminals dealing with a witness. They needed me discredited. They needed me on paper as a debtor. I did not sign it. I folded the paper and put it in my pocket. "I will have my lawyer review this." I said. Robert's eyes went cold. "That is not a good idea." "Camila," he said. His voice dropped. "If you walk out that door with that paper, you are on your own. No more safety net. And let me tell you, the world is a very hard place for a woman with a bad reputation. It already is." I said, "Thanks to you." I turned and walked out. My legs were shaking, but I did not stop. I heard Diane calling my name. A high, desperate sound. But I kept walking. I got into my car and locked the doors. I drove 3 blocks and pulled over, shaking so hard I could barely breathe. I had done it. I had refused the cage. But now I needed to know why they had built it. I drove back to my apartment. It was dark now. I did not turn on the lights. I sat at my kitchen table and pulled out the USB drive Eloise had left me. I plugged it into my laptop. There were dozens of files, scanned PDFs, images. I opened a folder labeled Bright Hearth Outreach. It sounded familiar. Bright Hearth was the family charity. My parents had started it 10 years ago to help displaced families. They held galas. They accepted donations from local businesses. They were always in the newspaper. Shaking hands with the mayor, I opened the file labeled Ledger, Private. It was a spreadsheet. Eloise must have copied it from my father's computer years ago. I ran my finger down the columns. Donation, $10,000. Source, Peterson Construction. Donation, $5,000. Source, anonymous. Then the withdrawals. Program expense, $2,000. Consulting fee, $3,000. Recipient, D. Parker. Administrative cost, $4,000. Recipient, R. Parker. I frowned. They were paying themselves. That wasn't illegal, necessarily, if it was disclosed, but the amounts were staggering. Then I saw the other withdrawals. Emergency relief, $8,000. Recipient, cash. Housing support, $12,000. Recipient, cash. Cash? You don't pay housing support in cash. You write a check to a landlord. I scrolled down. The dates matched perfectly with the upgrades to my parents' house. June 12th, $12,000 withdrawal. Cash. June 20th, new roof installed on Parker residence. September 4th, $15,000 withdrawal. Cash. September 10th, Diane purchases new Mercedes. I felt sick. They were skimming. They were using the charity as a personal piggy bank. They were soliciting money from the community to help poor families, and they were using it to renovate their kitchen. And then, I saw my name. November 1st. Beneficiary support, $2,000. Recipient, C. Parker. I froze. I had never received $2,000 from Bright Hearth. December 15th. Beneficiary support, $3,000. Recipient, C. Parker. There were dozens of entries over the last 5 years. According to this ledger, I had received nearly $40,000 in charitable support. They were using me. They were laundering the money through my name. If anyone ever audited the charity, they would point to these entries. They would say, "We didn't take the money. We gave it to our struggling daughter. She is unstable. She needed help. That was why they needed the narrative. That was why they needed me to be a thief and bad with money. If I was known as a reliable, honest professional, no one would believe I was taking thousands of dollars in charity handouts. But if I was the black sheep, if I was the unstable daughter who couldn't keep a job, then it made perfect sense. Poor Robert and Diane, draining their charity to support their deadbeat kid. The document Robert tried to make me sign, the acknowledgement of family support funds, it wasn't just about debt. It was about retroactively justifying the fraud. If I signed that, I was validating their fake ledger. I was confessing to receiving money I never saw. I pushed the laptop away. I felt a cold, hard knot form in my stomach. I wasn't just a scapegoat. I was a ghost employee in their criminal enterprise. I stood up and walked to the window. The rain had stopped. The streetlights reflected on the wet pavement. For years, I had wanted them to love me. I had wanted them to be proud of me. I had cried myself to sleep wondering what I had done wrong. I hadn't done anything wrong. I was just the necessary casualty of their greed. The tears didn't come. I waited for them. But the well was dry. I went to the bathroom and washed my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked older than 33. My eyes were hard. The softness around my mouth was gone. I picked up my phone and called Mara. It was late, past 9 o'clock. She answered on the first ring. "Did you sign it?" she asked. "No," I said. "Good. Mara?" I said. I looked at the USB drive glowing blue on my table. "I found it." "Found what?" "The reason?" I said, "It's a charity called Bright Hearth. They are stealing from it, and they are putting the theft in my name." There was a silence on the line. Then, Mara let out a long breath. Okay, she said. Her voice was sharp, energized. That changes the venue. That takes us out of civil court and into criminal. What do we do? I asked. We build a timeline. Mara said, we don't guess. We prove. We need to match every fake entry in that ledger to a real event in your life where you didn't get money. We need to show that while they were claiming to save you, they were actually starving you. I can do that. I said, I have my bank statements going back 10 years. I have every rejection letter. I have every lease I couldn't sign. Good, Mara said. Get to work. And Camilla? Yes? Lock your door. If they know you didn't sign the paper, they are going to get desperate. I hung up. I walked over to the door and engaged the deadbolt. Then I wedged a chair under the handle, just like they did in the movies. It seemed melodramatic, but then I remembered the look in my father's eyes when he held out that paper. It wasn't the look of a father. It was the look of a man watching his life's work threaten to burn down. I sat back down at the computer. I opened a new spreadsheet. Column A, date of alleged payment. Column B, actual bank balance. Column C, life event. I started typing. I typed through the night. I didn't feel tired. I felt like I was finally, after 33 years, writing my own story. And this time, I was going to write the ending. The morning Mara filed the cease and desist order. The air in Harbor Glen felt heavy, like a wet wool blanket draped over the city. I sat in her office while she signed the final preservation notice, a legal demand that required my parents to secure all records, emails, and financial documents related to me. It was a shot across the bow. It was supposed to make them freeze. Instead, it made them detonate. We expected silence. We expected them to retreat into their lawyers' offices and start negotiating a quiet settlement to make the problem go away. Eloise had predicted they would be terrified of exposure, but we had underestimated just how desperate they were. 3 days after the papers were served, the backlash arrived. It started with a notification on my phone, a LinkedIn alert, then another, then an email from a recruiter I had spoken to months ago. I opened my laptop. My inbox, usually a graveyard of rejection letters, was active. Ms. Parker. The first email read, "We received a concerning communication regarding your application status. Please see the attached. Given the nature of these claims, we are removing your resume from our active pool." I clicked the attachment. It was a screenshot of an email sent from an anonymous address. Concerned, citizen, watchdog@securemail.com. The subject line was, "Urgent background information, re. Camilla Parker." I read the text, and my stomach turned to water. To whom it may concern. This message is to inform you that Camilla Parker, currently residing at 402 Elm Street, is the subject of an ongoing private investigation regarding workplace theft and financial fraud. While no charges have been publicly filed yet, previous employers have noted a pattern of missing inventory and cash discrepancies. Ms. Parker, formerly known as Millie, in her previous residence in Oak Creek, has a history of fleeing jurisdictions when inquiries begin. Proceed with extreme caution. I stopped breathing. Millie. No one called me Millie. No one had called me Millie since I was 7 years old. It was a childhood nickname, a sweet, sticky thing my father used to whisper when he tucked me in. Good night, Millie, sleep tight, and Oak Creek. That was the name of the subdivision where we lived until I was 10. It wasn't on any of my background checks. It wasn't on my credit report. It was a detail that only existed in family photo albums and the memories of the people who raised me. They were using my childhood against me. They were taking the intimacy of our history and sharpening it into a shiv. I called Mara. My voice was shaking so hard I could barely get the words out. They sent it to everyone. I said, recruiters, local businesses, places I haven't even applied to yet. Mara told me to come in immediately. But before I could leave the apartment, there was a knock at my door. It was Mr. Henderson, my landlord. He was a decent man, a retired mechanic who usually only knocked if the water main was acting up. Today, he wouldn't meet my eyes. "Ms. Parker," he said, looking at his boots. "Hi, Mr. Henderson." I said, Is everything okay? I got a call today. He said, from a collection agency, or maybe it was a screening service. They didn't say the name. My heart hammered against my ribs. What did they say? They asked if you pay your rent on time, he said. Which I told them you do. But then they asked if I had any complaints from neighbors about missing packages. I felt the blood drain from my face. Missing packages? Yeah, he said. They said you had a profile flagged for mail interference. Now, look, Camilla, I have never had a problem with you, but I have a waiting list for this building. I can't have police cars showing up here. I can't have drama. There is no drama. Mr. Henderson, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, it is a mistake. It is identity theft. I am handling it. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw suspicion in his eyes. It was a seed that had been planted by a stranger's voice on the phone, and now it was taking root. Just get it sorted, he said. I don't want to have to give you a notice. He walked away. I closed the door and leaned against it, trembling. They weren't just attacking my career anymore. They were attacking my shelter. They were trying to make me radioactive. I went to Mara's office. She was not alone. Sitting in the chair opposite her desk was a man who looked like he had been sketched in charcoal. He wore a gray jacket that had seen better days, and his face was a map of sharp angles and weary lines. Camilla, this is Jonah Klein, Mara said. He is a private investigator. I have used him on cases like this before. Jonah stood up and offered a hand. His grip was dry and brief. Nice to meet you, he said. His voice was gravelly, quiet. Mara showed me the emails. Can you stop them? I asked. I can't stop them, Jonah said. The internet is a hydra. You cut off one head, 2 more grow back, but I can find out where the beast lives. He opened a laptop on the desk. I traced the IP address of the anonymous sender. He said they used a VPN, which is a virtual private network, to mask their location. Most people think that makes them invisible. It doesn't. It just makes them harder to see. He tapped a key. A map appeared on the screen. They made a mistake, Jonah said. They accessed the email account once without the VPN. Just for a second. Maybe the connection dropped. Maybe they forgot to toggle it on. But that 1 second gave me a ping. He pointed to a red dot on the map. Cedar Ridge, he said, a town 20 miles west of here. Specifically, a place called the Copy Stop. It is a print and ship store. I stared at the map. Cedar Ridge. My mother worked in Cedar Ridge. Her real estate office was 3 blocks from the town square. I pulled the security footage from the store. Jonah said, I have a friend who manages the security firm that covers that strip mall. He clicked a video file. Grainy black and white footage filled the screen. It showed a counter, a row of computers, and a person standing at Terminal 3. The person was wearing a hooded raincoat and sunglasses. Even though it was indoors, I leaned closer. The figure was slight. The posture was rigid. It wasn't my mother. It wasn't my father. It was a kid, maybe 20 years old. Who is that? I asked. I don't know yet, Jonah said. But look at how they paid. He switched to a still image of the transaction record. Prepaid Visa card, Jonah said. Untraceable. Usually, but I tracked the activation of the card. It was purchased at a drugstore in Cedar Ridge. He paused, looking at me with those charcoal eyes. It was purchased at the Walgreens on Main Street, at 12:15 in the afternoon on Tuesday. Tuesday, I whispered. Tuesday is the day my mother has her team meetings. I said, she goes to lunch at 12. There is a Walgreens right across the street from her office. Jonah nodded. I pulled the footage from the Walgreens. 2, he said. He clicked another file. This image was in color. It was sharp. There she was, Diane Parker, my mother. She was wearing her beige trench coat, the one she bought in London. She was standing at the checkout counter, holding a bottle of water and a prepaid Visa card. She was smiling at the cashier. It was the smile that broke me. It was her realtor smile, the one she used when she was closing a deal. Warm, reassuring, completely manufactured. She bought the card, Jonah said. She hired someone, probably a college kid looking for quick cash. to go to the print shop and send the emails. She kept her hands clean of the keyboard, but her fingerprints are on the money. I looked at her face on the screen. She looked so normal. She looked like a mother buying a gift card for a niece. She didn't look like a woman who was systematically destroying her daughter's life. "It is them," I said. "It is really them. We have the link," Mara said. Her voice was hard. "This connects the harassment directly to Diane. It proves malice. But there is more," Jonah said. He closed the laptop. "I did a deep dive on your social circle, your extended family." I felt a cold knot in my stomach. "What did you find?" "Your Aunt Linda?" Jonah asked. "She lives in Ohio." I said, "I haven't spoken to her in a year." "She posted on Facebook yesterday," Jonah said. He pulled out a printed screenshot. "Please keep my niece Camilla in your prayers. My sister Diane is going through so much right now trying to help her." It is heartbreaking to watch a child struggle with legal trouble and instability. But Diane is such a saint for standing by her. We are all hoping for a breakthrough. I read the words, legal trouble, instability. She has been calling them. I said, "She is ceding the ground. It is a preemptive strike." Mara said, "She is telling the family you are in legal trouble so that when we sue them, everyone will think, 'Oh, poor Diane. Camila is attacking her own parents just like they said she would.' It is inoculation. They were isolating me. They were making sure that when I finally screamed for help, everyone I knew would just shake their heads and say, 'Poor Camila. She has finally snapped.' I felt a sudden, violent urge to defend them. The reflex was so old, so deep, it shocked me. A voice in my head, a small, child's voice, whispered, 'Maybe she really is worried. Maybe she thinks she is helping. Don't embarrass the family. Don't make a scene.' I hated that voice. I hated that even now. With the knife in my back, I was worried about getting blood on their carpet. I looked at the picture of my mother buying the card. I forced myself to look at the smile. "They aren't protecting me," I said aloud. "They are burying me." Mara reached into her briefcase. "We have something else," she said. Something Eloise prepared for this exact moment. She pulled out a document with a blue cover. It was notarized. "This is an affidavit from a woman named Renee Calder." Mara said, "Do you know her?" The name sounded faint, like a bell ringing in another room. "I think so," I said. "She used to be on the board of Bright Hearth, the charity. She was the treasurer." Mara said, "She resigned 3 years ago." Abruptly, I opened the document. Statement of Renee Calder. I, Renee Calder, hereby state that during my tenure as treasurer of Bright Hearth Outreach, I witnessed financial irregularities that caused me great concern. Specifically, I noted that funds were being withdrawn for beneficiary support without proper documentation. When I asked Robert Parker about these withdrawals, he told me to keep things simple and that the money was going to a private family matter that required discretion. He told me that his daughter, Camila, was in significant debt and that the family was using the funds to keep her from bankruptcy. He asked me to list the withdrawals as program expenses to avoid embarrassing her. I felt uncomfortable with this characterization and the lack of a paper trail, so I resigned. I stared at the paper. He told her I was in debt 3 years ago. I said, "He was setting up the lie even then. He was using your reputation to cover the embezzlement." Mara said, "If Renee Calder had gone to the authorities, Robert would have thrown you under the bus. He would have said, 'I broke the rules to save my daughter.' He would have played the martyr. And you would have been the leech." I felt the rage then. It wasn't the hot, flashy rage of the email. It was a cold, dark thing. It was the rage of a person realizing they had been a prop in someone else's play for their entire life. "But there is a twist," Jonah said. He leaned forward. "I kept digging into Bright Hearth." He said, "I found the incorporation papers, the annual filings." He slid a piece of paper across the desk. "Look at the officer list for 2018. I looked. President, Robert Parker. Vice President, Diane Parker. Responsible contact/secretary, Camilla Parker. I stared at my name. I never agreed to this. I said, I never signed anything. I didn't even know I was an officer. You are listed as the responsible contact, Jonah said. That means legally, you are the point person for compliance. You are the one who is supposed to ensure the funds are used correctly. I felt the room spin. They didn't just use my name to explain the missing money. I whispered, they put my name on the paperwork. If the charity is audited, Mara said, her voice grave, and they find the missing funds, the liability falls on the officers. Robert and Diane can claim they were just board members, but the responsible contact, that is the person who goes to jail. They framed me. I said, they framed me years ago. Mara nodded. That is why they are destroying you now, she said. That is why they need you to be unstable and a thief, if the fraud comes out. Their defense will be, Camila was the secretary, Camila handled the books, Camila has a history of theft. She must have stolen the money from us. I sat back in the chair. I felt like I was looking down a long, dark tunnel. Every rejection, every intercepted reference, every whispered lie. It wasn't just control. It was a setup for a fall they knew was coming. They were fattening me up for the slaughter. I felt sick. I put my head in my hands. How do we fight this? I asked. If we expose the fraud, they blame me. If we don't expose it, they keep destroying me. Eloise knew. Mara said, I looked up. She knew? She suspected they had put your name on the filings. Mara said, she couldn't prove it then. But she anticipated the move. That is why she left the nuclear option. The nuclear option? Mara opened a safe in the corner of her office. She pulled out a sealed envelope. It was thick. Eloise created a disclosure packet. Mara said, it contains Renee Calder's statement, the call logs, the ledger she stole, and a sworn affidavit from Eloise herself, stating that you had no knowledge of the charity's inner workings. She placed the envelope on the desk. But here is the key, Mara said. Eloise set up a dead man's switch. She sent a copy of this packet to a neutral third party, a forensic accounting firm in the capital. She looked at her watch. If we do not check in with them by Friday at 5 o'clock, the packet is automatically mailed to the State Charitable Oversight Division, the release valve. It creates a dilemma for your parents. Mara said, if they keep attacking you, we let the packet go. The Oversight Division gets everything. The fraud is exposed. But with Eloise's affidavit and the timeline of abuse, you are painted as the victim, not the perpetrator. And if they stop? I asked. If they stop? Mara said, we have leverage. We can force them to resign. We can force them to dissolve the charity. We can force them to clear your name. But we have to survive until Friday. Jonah said, why? I asked. Because once they realize we have the evidence, Jonah said, they are going to panic. Real panic. Not the calculated stuff they have been doing. They are going to try to erase the proof. They will try to get the files. I said, they will come for you. Mara said, not physically. Maybe. But they will try to get into your apartment. They will try to get that USB drive. They will try to get the red notebook. I touched my bag. The notebook was there. The USB drive was in my pocket. I am not going back to the apartment. I said, no. Jonah said, you have to go back. If you disappear, they will spin it. She has run away. She is guilty. You have to be visible. You have to be normal. I have to be bait. I said, Jonah didn't smile. Yes, he said, you have to be bait. I drove home in the rain. The city looked different now. Every car behind me looked like a tail. Every person on the sidewalk looked like a spy. I parked my car on the street, not in the garage. I wanted it visible. I walked up the stairs to my apartment. I could feel eyes on me. I unlocked the door. The apartment was quiet. I checked the piece of tape I had placed on the door frame, a trick I learned from a spy movie, something I thought was silly until today. The tape was broken. Someone had been inside. I froze in the hallway. I listened. Silence. I stepped inside, my heart pounding in my throat. The apartment looked normal. The television was where I left it. The laptop was closed on the table, but the air felt disturbed. I walked to the bedroom. I opened the closet. My clothes were shifted slightly. I went to the desk where I kept my papers, my bills, my lease. The stack was neat, but the order was wrong. The electric bill was on top. I always put the newest bill at the bottom. They had searched. They were looking for the ledger. They were looking for Eloise's note. They hadn't found them because I had them with me. My phone rang. It was a blocked number. I stared at it. Answer it. A voice in my head said, "Be the bait." I picked up. "Hello? Camila." It was my mother. Her voice was not the realtor voice. It was not the weeping mother voice. It was thin, sharp, and terrified. "Mom," I said, "we need to talk." She said, "Not on the phone. In person. I have nothing to say to you." I said, "You don't understand what you are doing." She hissed. "You are listening to that lawyer. You are listening to ghosts. You are going to ruin us all. I am not the one who stole money." "Mom," I said, "I am not the one who framed her daughter." There was a silence, a heavy breathing silence. "We did it for you," she said. Her voice broke. "We did it to build a future for the family. For you." "Don't," I said. "Don't lie to me anymore." "Meet us," she said. "Tomorrow night, Marrow and Pine, the restaurant on the hill, just us. No lawyers, no recorders. We can explain. We can make a deal." "A deal?" I asked. "We can make it go away." She said, "All of it. The calls, the emails, the debt. We can pay off your landlord. We can fix it. But you have to bring the drive." The drive. She knew. How did she know about the drive? Then I looked at the broken tape on the door. They hadn't just searched. They had planted something. A bug? A camera? I looked at the ceiling light fixture. It was slightly askew. "I know you have it." "Camila," she said, "bring the drive, or we release the rest of the emails. We have photos. Camila, photos from when you were sick in college. We will leak them." I felt a coldness spread through my veins. They were threatening to humiliate me with my own medical history. "Marrow and Pine," she said. 7 o'clock. Don't be late." The line went dead. I looked at the light fixture. I walked over to the kitchen chair, dragged it to the center of the room, and climbed up. There, tucked inside the glass bowl of the light, was a small black square, a listening device. They had been listening. I reached up and pulled it down. I held it in my hand. It was warm. I didn't crush it. I didn't flush it. I climbed down and set it gently on the table. I leaned close to it. "I will be there," I whispered to the black plastic. I wasn't going to make a deal. I was going to finish it. I grabbed my bag. I checked for the USB drive. I checked for the red notebook. I walked out of the apartment. I needed to call Jonah. I needed to call Mara. The game had changed. They weren't hunting me anymore. I was hunting them. And I had the one thing they couldn't bribe. Threaten or gaslight. I had the truth. And on Friday at 5 o'clock, the truth was going to scream. The job description for the position at Lakeshore Patient Advocacy sat on my kitchen table like a paper boat in a storm. It was wrinkled from how many times I had held it, smoothing out the edges while I drank my morning coffee. Case manager. It was a role that required navigating insurance labyrinths for families with chronic illnesses, fighting for coverage, and translating bureaucratic silence into answers. It was exactly what I had been doing for myself for 6 months. I applied on a Tuesday. I interviewed on a Thursday. On Monday morning, the call came. The hiring manager was a woman named Eleanor, who had a voice like cracked parchment. "We would like to offer you the position." "Camila," she said. I held the phone away from my ear for a second, staring at it. The words sounded foreign. Offer, position. I waited for the caveat. I waited for the hesitation. I accepted immediately, my voice steady. Though my hand was gripping the edge of the table so hard my knuckles turned white. I started 2 days later. Lakeshore was housed in a converted warehouse in the Arts District. It smelled of coffee and old books. My desk was near a window that overlooked the gray, churning water of the harbor. For the first 4 hours, I felt a phantom limb sensation, the ghost of my old life, the one where I was competent and respected, trying to reattach itself to my body. I filled out tax forms. I set up my email signature. I allowed myself, for one reckless minute, to feel safe. Then, at 2 o'clock, Eleanor walked over to my desk. "Camila," she said, "do you have a moment?" The tone was wrong. It wasn't the welcoming tone of the morning. It was the flat, careful tone of a person delivering a diagnosis. I stood up. My legs felt heavy. She led me to her office and closed the door. She didn't sit down. She stood behind her desk, holding a piece of paper. "We received a message through our anonymous ethics portal about an hour ago," she said. The room seemed to tilt. The phantom limb fell off. I looked at the paper in her hand. "It says you are currently under investigation for workplace theft at your previous employment," Eleanor said. "It says there is a pending civil action regarding misappropriated funds." She looked at me. Her eyes were not angry. They were disappointed. They were the eyes of a woman who thought she had hired a professional and had instead hired a liability. Usually, in my experience, when we get something like this so early in a tenure, we simply cut ties during the probationary period. She said, "It is safer for the organization." I felt the familiar coldness spreading through my chest. This was the script. This was the moment I packed my box and walked out into the rain, ashamed and silent. But I wasn't that Camila anymore. I was the Camila who had opened box 412. "May I see it?" I asked. Eleanor blinked. She seemed surprised I hadn't started crying or apologizing. "I suppose," she said. She handed me the paper. Subject: Alert regarding new hire. C. Parker. Reliable sources confirm active investigation into inventory theft and cash skimming. High risk. It wasn't signed. I took a deep breath. I reached into my bag, the bag I now carried everywhere, heavy with the weight of my defense, and pulled out a blue folder. "Eleanor," I said, "I am going to show you something, and I'm going to ask you to wait 10 minutes before you make a decision." I opened the folder. I laid out the timeline Mara and I had built. I laid out the cease and desist letter we had served to my parents 3 days ago. I laid out the transcript of the call where Robert pretended to be a reference. "This is not a tip," I said, my voice calm, almost clinical. "This is retaliation." Eleanor picked up the cease and desist letter. She read it. She looked at the date. "My parents are currently the subject of a legal inquiry regarding their own financial conduct." I said, "They are attempting to discredit me to prevent me from testifying. I anticipated they would contact you." I placed the transcript of the fake reference call on top of the pile. "This is a recording of my father impersonating a former employer." I said, "We captured it last week." Eleanor read the transcript. She looked up at me, then back at the paper. The disappointment in her eyes was replaced by confusion, and then, slowly, by horror. "Your parents?" she asked. "Yes," I said. She sat down. She looked at the anonymous email, then at the legal documents. "This is extreme," she said. "It is," I agreed, "and if you let me go because of it, you are completing the circuit for them. You are letting them use your organization as a weapon." Eleanor sat in silence for a long time. I could hear the hum of the server room next door. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. "I cannot ignore a theft accusation," she said finally. "I have a duty to the board. I understand." I said, "But," she continued, "I also have a duty to fairness. And this looks like a war." She slid the papers back to me. "I am going to pause your onboarding," she said. "You will not have access to client funds or sensitive data for the next week. I am going to send this to our legal counsel. If your documents hold up, and if this tip cannot be substantiated with a real police report or court filing, we will proceed." She looked me in the eye. "Do not make me regret this." "Camila." "I won't," I said. I walked back to my desk. I didn't pack my box. I sat down and opened my email. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. They were shaking from the adrenaline of survival. I had held the line. That night, the rain returned. It battered the windows of my apartment, washing away the dust of the city but leaving the grime of the day. I was heating up soup when the buzzer rang. I checked the monitor. It was a woman in a trench coat, holding a large umbrella. She looked up at the camera, her face wet and pale. It was my mother. I debated not answering. I debated calling the police, but Jonah's voice echoed in my head. Be the bait. I buzzed her in. I left the door unlocked and stood in the middle of the living room. I made sure my phone was face down on the table, recording. Diane Parker walked in. She looked smaller than I remembered. She was always a woman who took up space, with her perfume, with her laugh, with her opinions. Now, she looked like she was shrinking inside her expensive coat. She closed the door and leaned against it. She didn't say hello. She just looked at me with eyes that were red-rimmed and swollen. He went too far. She whispered. I didn't offer her a seat. I stood with my arms crossed, guarding my chest. Who went too far? I asked. Robert, she said. She walked into the room, shedding water on the floor, the email to the new job. I told him not to do it. I told him you would figure it out. She looked at me, pleading. He is out of control. Cammy, he is terrified. You have to understand. He built everything on his reputation. Bright Hearth is his legacy. And what about my reputation? I asked. What about my legacy? Or was I just the fuel for his fire? Diane winced. She reached out a hand, but I stepped back. I know, she said. I know it looks bad, but we were going to pay it back. Every cent. We just needed time. The market turned on us, and the house repairs. It just snowballed. We never meant to hurt you. You framed me. Mom, I said, you put my name on the filings. You told the world I was a thief so that if you got caught, I would be the one in handcuffs. That isn't a snowball. That is an execution. She began to cry. It wasn't the polite, silent weeping she did at funerals. It was ugly, gasping sobs. I am your mother, she choked out. I changed your diapers. I sat up with you when you had fevers. Doesn't that count for anything? I looked at her. I looked for the love I had been desperate for my whole life. I saw it there, buried deep, but it was twisted. It was a selfish, consuming thing. She loved me, yes, but she loved her life more. It counts. I said, that is why this hurts. Then stop it, she said. Her voice sharpened, suddenly lucid. Stop the lawyer. Stop the investigation. If you report the charity, you destroy us. You send your father to prison. You send me to the poorhouse. Is that what you want? To destroy your family? I am not destroying the family. I said, you did that when you decided I was expendable. Diane wiped her face. The sorrow hardened into something brittle. If you don't stop, she said, I can't protect you from what Robert will do next. Is that a threat? I asked. It is a warning, she said. He is desperate, and a desperate man doesn't have limits. She turned and walked out. She didn't look back. She left a puddle of water on the floor and the smell of ozone and fear in the air. I locked the door. I saved the recording on my phone. 2 hours later, my phone rang. No caller ID. I answered it. Hello, Dad? I said. There was a pause. I could hear the clink of ice in a glass. You are a stubborn girl, Robert said. His voice was thick. He had been drinking. I am a grown woman, I said. We can end this tonight, he said. I have drawn up a new agreement. I am not signing your loan document. I said, this is different, he said. It is a settlement. I will agree to cease all contact with your employers. I will retract the statements I made. Privately, I will give you a lump sum of $20,000 to get you on your feet. I waited. There was always a catch. And in exchange? I asked. In exchange, you sign a statement admitting that your accusations regarding Bright Hearth were made in error, due to emotional distress, he said, and you agree to a private repayment plan for the family support. We don't have to enforce the payments. Camila, it is just a formality, a piece of paper to keep in the safe. He was trying to buy my silence with my own innocence. He wanted me to confess to being crazy so he could stay rich. And if I don't? I asked. He laughed. It was a dry, awful sound. How are you going to pay your rent? Millie? He asked, using the nickname like a knife. That job at Lakeshore? They are going to fire you. I will make sure of it. I will call the board members personally. I will tell them about the drugs. I never took drugs. I said, "It doesn't matter what you did." He said, "It matters what people believe. And people believe successful men in cashmere sweaters. They don't believe single women with bad credit and a history of instability." I hung up. I sat in the dark. My hands were shaking again. He was right about one thing. I was running out of money. The legal fees were eating everything. Mara was working on a deferral, but the filing costs, the investigator, the rent, it was a crushing weight. If I couldn't pay my rent, I would be evicted. If I was evicted, I looked unstable. He was squeezing off my air supply. The next morning, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Mr. Sterling, 10 a.m., 440 Broad Street, Suite 300. I remembered the name from Eloise's note, the fiduciary. I took an early lunch break from Lakeshore. I walked the 6 blocks to Broad Street. The building was old stone, solid and quiet. Mr. Sterling was a man who looked like he had been born wearing a suit. He sat behind a mahogany desk that was completely empty except for a single file. "Ms. Parker," he said. He did not smile. He gestured to a chair. I sat down. "Your grandmother, Eloise Parker, set up a blind trust 7 years ago." He said, "She instructed me to activate it only under specific conditions." "What conditions?" I asked. Mr. Sterling opened the file. "Condition 1, you must be estranged from your parents. Condition 2, you must be in financial peril due to their interference." He looked at me over his glasses. "I received a notification from Mara Wexler yesterday, confirming that both conditions have been met." He said, he pushed a check across the desk. It was not a fortune. It was not enough to buy a house or retire on an island. It was $45,000. But to me, in that moment, it was everything. Eloise liquidated her jewelry collection years ago. "Mr. Sterling said, "She didn't want your parents to inherit it. She knew they would just sell it to buy more things they didn't need. So she sold it herself and put the money here. She called it the escape hatch." I looked at the check. The escape hatch. She knew. I whispered. She knew they would try to starve me out. She was a very observant woman. "Mr. Sterling said, "She left a note to go with the funds." He handed me a small card. "Money is the only language they speak. Camila, so here is enough to tell them to go to hell." I started to cry. I cried right there in the office of the serious man in the suit. I cried because for the first time in my life, someone had not only seen my struggle, but had prepared a safety net for it. I wasn't just loved. I was protected. Mr. Sterling handed me a box of tissues. He waited patiently until I was done. "Thank you," I said, wiping my eyes. He nodded. "Deposit it today, Ms. Parker, and good luck." I walked out of the building. The city looked different. The buildings looked sharper. The noise of the traffic sounded like music. I had $45,000. I could pay my rent for 2 years. I could pay Mara. I could pay Jonah. My father's threat. "How are you going to pay your rent?" Millie? Dissolved into smoke. He had no leverage left. I went straight to Mara's office. Jonah was there, looking at a whiteboard covered in timelines. "We have a problem," Jonah said as I walked in. "What?" I asked. I felt invincible. But his face brought me back to earth. "Robert is moving money," Jonah said. "Fast. He is liquidating assets. He sold the boat yesterday. He is trying to cash out the investment accounts. He is running," Mara said, "or he is hiding the assets so that if we sue, there is nothing to take. He is preparing to flee." I said, "Or he is preparing to bankrupt the charity and blame it on the incompetent secretary," Jonah said. We need to trigger the oversight report." I said, "We can't wait until Friday. We can't just dump the files." Mara said, "We need the narrative to be perfect. We need to explain why he started stealing. Juries understand greed, but this looks like something else. This looks like pathology. There is someone who can explain it," a voice said from the doorway. We turned. Standing there was a woman I hadn't seen in 3 years. She was older, her hair completely gray now, but her posture was upright. Renee Calder, the the former treasurer of Brighthearth. Mara had called her Renee. I said, "Hello, Camilla," she said. She looked at me with a mixture of pity and respect. "I heard you are finally fighting back." "I am," I said. Renee walked into the room and sat down. She placed her purse on the floor. "You want to know why he did it?" she said. "You see the ledger, and you see the theft, but you don't understand the origin. Tell us." Mara said, "It was 6 years ago." Renee said, "The spring gala." Robert stood up on stage. He was drunk on applause. He wanted to be the biggest man in the room, so he announced a surprise donation. He said an anonymous benefactor had pledged $200,000 to the building fund. I remember that. I said. Everyone cheered. He looked so proud. There was no benefactor. Renee said, "He made it up. He did it because the mayor was in the front row and he wanted to look connected." She shook her head. The next day, I asked him where the check was. He stalled. He said it was coming. A month passed. The contractors needed to be paid. The board was asking questions. "So he stole it?" Jonah asked. He panicked. Renee said, "He couldn't admit he lied. It would have humiliated him. So he started moving money from the operating budget to the building fund to cover the missing donation. But then the operating budget had a hole. So he borrowed from the emergency fund. It became a shell game. He was robbing Peter to pay Paul. And he was terrified of being caught. And then he found a scapegoat." I said. Renee nodded. "He came to me one day." She said. "He looked sick." He said, "My daughter is in trouble. She has debts. I have been helping her, but I lost track of the amounts." He started crying. He said he was a bad father for enabling you, but a good father for saving you. He spun a story so convincing that even I believed it for a while. "He used my love for him against me." I said. "He used your existence against you." Renee corrected. "You were the perfect cover. The troubled daughter." It explained every missing dollar. It made him look sympathetic instead of criminal. I felt a cold precision settle in my mind. It wasn't just fraud. It was vanity. He had destroyed my life to protect his ego. "We have enough," I said. Mara looked at me. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Once we send this package to the Midvale State Charitable Oversight Division, there is no going back. It becomes a state investigation. The police will be involved. Your parents will be arrested." I thought about the anonymous email. I thought about the tip to Lakeshore. I thought about the listening device in my light fixture. They didn't give me a choice. I said, "They declared war. I am just finishing it." "Do it," I said. Mara nodded. She turned to her computer. "I am uploading the digital packet now," she said. "I am attaching Renee's affidavit and the ledger." I watched the progress bar on the screen. Sending. It took 10 seconds. 10 seconds to undo 30 years of lies. Sent. "It is done," Mara said. "The State Attorney General's office will have it in the morning." "Now what?" I asked. "Now we wait for the explosion," Jonah said. I went back to my apartment. I didn't feel fear anymore. I felt a strange, vibrating energy. I sat at my table. I took out my phone. I opened the voice recorder app. I pressed record. "My name is Camilla Parker." I said to the empty room, "Today is October 14th. I have just authorized the release of evidence implicating my parents, Robert and Diane Parker, in charity fraud and embezzlement." I paused. "I am doing this because they tried to erase me. They tried to rewrite my history to cover their crimes. But I am not a thief. I am not unstable. And I am not their victim anymore. I am the witness. I stopped the recording. I saved the file. I checked the door. It was locked. I checked the windows. I lay down on my bed, fully clothed. I kept my hand on my phone. The silence of the apartment felt different tonight. It wasn't the silence of isolation. It was the silence of a held breath. Somewhere in the city, a server was processing a file that would turn my parents' world to ash. Somewhere in the suburbs, my father was pouring another drink, thinking he had won because he had money and I didn't. He didn't know about Mr. Sterling. He didn't know about Renee. He didn't know about the red notebook. He didn't know that the daughter he thought he had broken was the one who was about to bring the roof down. I closed my eyes. Sleep tight. Millie, I whispered to myself, tomorrow, we wake up. The meeting at Lakeshore Patient Advocacy was scheduled for 9 in the morning. The conference room was glass-walled, looking out over the harbor where the water was a flat, slate gray. Eleanor sat at the head of the table, flanked by the organization's legal counsel, a man named Mr. Henderson, who wore a tie that looked too tight. I sat on the opposite side. Next to me was Mara. We didn't bring boxes of files. We brought one slim binder. This is a formal review regarding the allegations received via our ethics portal. Eleanor began. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were tired. She looked like she hadn't slept. I understand. I said, Mr. Henderson opened a folder. We have an anonymous report claiming you are under investigation for theft, he said. We also have a duty to protect this organization's reputation and assets. Unless you can provide concrete proof that these allegations are false, we will have to terminate your employment. It was the moment I had dreaded for years, the moment where the institution closed ranks and expelled the problem. But I wasn't pleading this time. I wasn't crying in a cubicle. I opened my binder. I am not asking you to believe me. I said, I am asking you to look at the timeline. I slid a single sheet of paper across the table. It was a grid. On the left were the dates of my job applications. On the right were the dates of the anonymous tips received by those employers. Every single tip arrived within 48 hours of a reference check. I said, and every single tip used the exact same phrase, pattern of dishonesty. I pulled out the affidavit from Jonah Klein. This is a sworn statement from a licensed private investigator. I said, it confirms that the IP address used to send the email to you originated from a location directly connected to my mother's place of employment. Mr. Henderson picked up the paper. He frowned. This connects your mother to the email? He asked. It connects her payment method to the service used to send it. Mara clarified. Then I played the recording, the one from the reference trap. My father's voice filled the clean, sterile conference room. I am just trying to protect people. She has a history of taking what isn't hers. I watched Eleanor's face. She wasn't looking at the papers anymore. She was looking at me. She saw the exhaustion in my eyes, but she also saw the steel. They are using you. Eleanor, I said softly, they are using your ethics portal to harass a witness. If you fire me, you are not protecting the company. You are participating in obstruction of justice. Mr. Henderson leaned back. He took off his glasses. This is highly unusual, he said. It is domestic abuse, Mara said sharply. It just happens to be financial and professional rather than physical, but the intent is the same. Control. Eleanor stood up. She walked to the window and looked out at the harbor. We will not terminate you, she said without turning around. Mr. Henderson started to speak, but she cut him off. We will suspend the investigation pending the outcome of your civil suit. Eleanor said, you can return to work. But Camila? Yes? If any police report is actually filed against you, a real one, not an email, you are gone. Understood. I said, I walked out of that room with my job. It wasn't a victory parade. It was a ceasefire. But it was enough, while I was fighting for my livelihood. Mara was launching the missile. She sent a formal notification to my parents' attorney. We were prepared to file a civil complaint for defamation, tortious interference, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We attached a draft of the complaint. It was brutal. It listed every fake call, every email, every intercepted letter. We didn't mention the charity fraud. Not yet. That was the second warhead. That night, the response came. But it didn't come from a lawyer. I was at my apartment, packing a bag to stay at a hotel. Jonah had insisted it wasn't safe to sleep there. When my car alarm started blaring, I ran to the window. My car was parked on the street below under a flickering streetlight. I saw a figure in a dark hoodie sprinting away from the vehicle. They weren't carrying my stereo. They weren't carrying my spare tire. They were carrying a white accordion folder. My heart stopped. That folder was in my trunk. It contained copies of the emails. the call logs, and the draft complaint. It didn't have the originals, those were in Mara's safe, but it had enough to show them exactly how much we knew. I grabbed my keys and ran downstairs. The back window of my sedan was shattered. Glass covered the back seat like diamonds. The trunk was popped open. The folder was gone. I stood in the rain, looking at the empty space. They weren't trying to steal value. They were trying to erase history. They thought if they took the paper, the truth would disappear with it. I called Jonah. They hit the car. I said, "I know." Jonah said, "I am watching the feed." "You are watching?" "I put a camera on the street lamp yesterday." He said, "I didn't tell you because I wanted a genuine reaction if anything happened. Did you see them?" "I saw them," Jonah said. "And Camilla?" "You aren't going to believe what they left behind." I looked down at the wet pavement near the rear tire. Lying in the gutter, soaked with rain, was a canvas tote bag. It was beige with green handles. I picked it up. Printed on the side, in cheerful green letters, was a logo. Bright Hearth Outreach. Building families. Building hope. I stared at it. It was absurd. It was like a criminal leaving a business card. The thief had likely used it to carry tools and dropped it in the panic. It was a volunteer bag. My parents had boxes of them in their garage. "It is almost funny." I whispered into the phone. "It isn't funny," Jonah said. "It is careless. They are sloppy. Camilla, they are panicking, and sloppy people make dangerous mistakes." I went back upstairs. I didn't feel safe. Even with the door locked, I felt like the walls were glass. I sat on my bed and opened my bag. There was one envelope left. The final letter from Eloise. The front of the envelope read, "Open only if they try to erase the evidence." I tore it open. "Camilla, if you are reading this, they have done something desperate. They have tried to steal the proof. I knew they would. Robert cannot stand to lose control, and Diane cannot stand to lose face. Do not worry about what they took. I made copies. 3 sets. One is with Mara, one is with me, and one is with a man named Mr. Henderson at the firm of Henderson and Clark. He has instructions to release the full file to the State Oversight Division if you do not check in with him by the 1st of every month. I knew I would be gone, so I made sure the truth would outlive me. You are not alone in this fight. I am right there with you, holding the shield. Love, Grandma." I pressed the letter to my lips. She was a general. She had fought a war from her deathbed so I could win it from the trenches. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. "Marrow and Pine. Tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. Please. We just want to talk. No lawyers. Just family." I looked at the shattered glass of my car window outside. I looked at the Bright Hearth tote bag drying in my bathtub. "Just family." I texted back. "I will be there." I wasn't going to reconcile. I was going to get the final piece of the puzzle. I needed them to say it. I needed them to admit it to my face. Marrow and Pine was the kind of restaurant where the lighting was dim and the menus didn't have prices. It was my parents' favorite place. It was neutral ground, or so they thought. I arrived at 7 sharp. I wore a black dress. I felt like I was going to a funeral. They were waiting at a corner table. Robert was wearing a suit, but his tie was loosened. He looked 10 years older than he had a month ago. Diane was wearing pearls, but her hands were twisting a napkin in her lap. They stood up when I approached. "Camilla," Diane said, "thank you for coming." I didn't sit down immediately. I looked at them. "I am here." I said, "You have 10 minutes. Please, sit," Robert said. His voice was hoarse. I sat. I placed my small clutch bag on the table. Inside, the voice recorder was already running. "We want to apologize," Robert said. He didn't look at me. He looked at his water glass. "Things got out of hand. We never intended for it to go this far." "Breaking into my car is out of hand?" I asked. "Sending anonymous emails to my boss is out of hand?" Robert flinched. "We were trying to protect the family." He said, "You have to understand. Camilla, the charity, it is complicated. There were cash flow issues. We borrowed some money to keep the family afloat. To keep you afloat." "Me?" I asked. "You didn't give me a dime." "Dad, You laundered the money through my name. It was a loan structure, he snapped, his voice rising. It was accounting. We were going to pay it back before anyone noticed, but then you started asking questions. You started acting. Erratic. Erratic, I repeated. We had to manage the narrative. Robert said, if people thought you were reliable, they might believe you if you said something crazy about the money. We had to make sure. He stopped. He realized what he was saying. You had to make sure I had no credibility. I finished for him. You had to make sure I was the thief so you could be the saints. Diane reached across the table. We love you. Cammy, she said. We did it to save the house, to save your inheritance. My inheritance? I laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. You stole my future to save my inheritance? We can fix it, Robert said. He leaned in. We can stop the calls. We can get you a job. I have friends. We just need you to drop the lawsuit and give us the drive. The drive. Always the drive. I looked at Diane. She wasn't looking at Robert. She was watching the door, as if expecting the police to burst in. You knew, didn't you? Mom? I asked. Diane looked at me. You didn't just let him do it. I said, you helped him. You bought the prepaid card for the emails. You called the temp agency. You were the one who suggested the instability angle. Weren't you? Because it is harder to disprove than theft. Diane's face hardened. The mask slipped. Someone had to be the adult. She said coldly, Robert was falling apart. He was going to confess everything 3 years ago. I told him to stick to the plan. We needed a reason for the missing money. You were the reason. There it was. The co-conspirator. She wasn't the passive wife. She was the architect. I looked at them both. The banality of their evil was breathtaking. They weren't monsters under the bed. They were people who liked nice dinners and expensive cars and didn't care who they had to burn to keep them. I reached into my bag and pulled out the recorder. I set it on the table between the salt shaker and the candle. The red light was steady. What is that? Robert asked. He went pale. It is the truth, I said. I looked at them. If I am a thief? I asked, my voice ringing in the sudden silence of the table. Why are you so afraid of what Grandma left me? Robert stared at the device. Diane put a hand to her mouth. The silence stretched. It was heavy, suffocating. It was the sound of a lie dying. I stood up. I am done, I said. I walked out of the restaurant. I didn't look back. I heard Robert calling my name, but it sounded like it was coming from underwater. I walked into the cool night air. I called Mara. File it, I said. The Brighthearth report? She asked. Everything. I said, the report, the ledger, the recordings, burn it down. The next morning, the sun rose over Harbor Glen. It was a clear, brilliant day. At 10 o'clock, Mara and I walked into the State Oversight Division building. We handed over the packet. By noon, the news broke. Local charity heads under investigation for fraud. Brighthearth outreach directors. Accused of embezzlement. My phone started ringing. Reporters. Friends I hadn't heard from in years. I turned it off. At 2 o'clock, the call came from their lawyer. It was an emergency request for a settlement conference. We met at a neutral law office. The conference room was large and smelled of lemon polish. Robert and Diane were there. They looked like ghosts. Robert was unshaven. Diane was wearing sunglasses indoors. Their lawyer, a high-priced shark named Mr. Sterling, no relation to the fiduciary, slid a paper across the table. My clients are prepared to offer a comprehensive settlement, he said. I read it. It was an offer of $500,000, a retraction of all statements made to employers, a public apology for misunderstandings regarding family matters. But there was a clause. Clause 14. Claimant agrees to sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding all operations of Brighthearth Outreach and acknowledges that any financial discrepancies were the result of administrative error. Not malfeasance. They were still trying to buy the lie. They wanted to pay me $500,000 to say it was a mistake, not a crime. I looked at the money. It was enough to change my life. It was enough to buy a house, start a business, disappear. I looked at my parents. They were watching me with hungry, desperate eyes. They thought they had won. They thought everyone had a price. I looked at Mara. She gave me a small nod. I picked up the pen. I looked at clause 14. I drew a thick, black line through it. No, I said. Robert made a sound like a wounded animal. You can't be serious, he said. That is $500,000. Camilla, I don't want your money. I said, I want my name. I pushed the paper back. I will take the retraction. I said, I will take the apology. But I will not sign the NDA, and I will not lie about the charity. The investigation proceeds. But that ruins us, Diane screamed. She stood up, knocking over her chair. You are sending us to jail. You sent yourselves to jail, I said calmly. I am just turning on the lights. I stood up. See you in court, I said. I walked out of the room. The hallway was long and bright. I walked toward the exit signs. My heels clicked on the marble floor. I was 33 years old. I had no job security, a car with a broken window, and a war ahead of me. But I was free. I pushed open the heavy glass doors and stepped out into the city. The air smelled of rain and exhaust and possibility. I took a deep breath. For the first time in my life, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. I was looking ahead, and the view was beautiful. Thank you for listening to this story. It has been a journey through the shadows of family betrayal and the hard-won light of truth. I hope Camilla's fight resonated with you. I would love to hear from you. Please comment below and tell me where you are listening from. I am always amazed to see how far these stories travel. And if you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice served cold. Share your thoughts in English. Did Camilla make the right choice turning down the money? Until next time.